Washington Journal continues.
Joining us from New York is Governor Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico and the current Libertarian presidential nominee, joining us to take your questions. Governor, good morning.
Good morning, Pedro.
First of all, tell us a little bit about your philosophy of governance and what does it mean to you if you were to become president of the United States? What would you stand for?
Well, I would stand for smaller government, for starters. The notion that government is too big, that it taxes too much, and when it taxes too much, it takes money out of my pocket that I could be spending on my life. When it comes to personal freedom and liberty, look, it should all be about choice. All of us should be able to make choices in our own lives that only affect our own lives, unless, of course, those decisions put other people in harm's way. And then regarding military intervention, let's stop with the military intervention that has resulted in the world being less safe as opposed to more safe. The fact that we put boots on the ground, the fact that we drop bombs, the fact that we fly drones and kill thousands of innocent people, I think at the end of the day have the unintended consequence of making things worse, not better.
We had a viewer earlier on that asked, as far as a question to you, is how do you differ from the current presidential candidate? Specifically, how would you differ? Take a topic and how would you differ, say, on Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, say, on the economy? What would you do differently than they've already proposed?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think that government will grow under Hillary Clinton. I think taxes will rise, and I think that she has been the architect, really, of foreign policy in this world. So what changes from a foreign policy perspective? Not much. Government gets bigger, taxes get higher. Look, with regard to Donald Trump, I think I'm 180 degrees when it comes to deporting 11 million illegal immigrants. They're not taking jobs that U.S. citizens want. Don't build a fence across the border. I think that's a crazy idea. They're not murderers and rapists. Statistically, they commit far less crime than U.S. citizens. He says that he wants to kill the families of Muslim terrorists. He says he wants to bring back waterboarding or worse. He says he's for free market, but in the next sentence he says he's going to force Apple to make their iPads and their iPhones in the United States. He says he wants to impose a 35% tariff on imported goods. At the end of the day, who pays for that? Well, you and I do. So a lot of differences when it comes to Donald Trump.
202-748-8000 for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and for Independents, 202-748-8002. And if you're a Libertarian and you want to ask questions of Governor Johnson, 202-748-8003. Coming out of the convention, Governor Johnson, there were several questions about what separates you specifically as a Libertarian rather than another form of a Republican. In fact, there's a big philosophical discussion about the purity within the Libertarian Party of holding to its ideals. How would you define yourself? What separates you then, say, from a Republican? And do you think that purity idea is going to be a challenge for you in gaining support?
Well, first of all, I think that there are tens of millions of Americans who have no idea what it is to be a libertarian and yet are libertarians. They just don't know it. So speaking with a broad brushstroke, libertarian. Fiscally conservative, socially liberal, I think most people fall in that category. I have issues when it comes to Democrats, when it comes to spending and government being the solution to everything. I would argue that the government, although well-intentioned, really doesn't provide solutions at the end of the day. It just taxes more. And then Republicans, bent on this social conservative dogma that at the end of the day puts people in prison for personal choices, a drug war being example, mandatory sentencing, the fact that we have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Come on, people should be allowed to make choices in their own lives.
As far as also your running mate, William Weld, tell a little bit about why you chose him. And there were some questions even at the convention itself about whether he was a Libertarian or a Republican. And by the way, if you want to watch that convention, you could watch it on C-SPAN. Governor Johnson, talk about your decision to choose Governor Weld.
Well, Bill Weld has been a role model to me. Bill served 2 terms as governor of Massachusetts, heavily blue state, served as a Republican, served as a fiscal conservative and social liberal. mine the same experience. I served as governor 2 terms as a Republican in a heavily blue state, as a Republican, being fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Both of us have labeled ourselves or considered it a badge of honor to have been labeled as libertarians, libertarian/Republican. We got a problem on the Republican side when it comes to social dogma. Both of us do. And I just think it speaks volumes that both of us got reelected by bigger margins the second time than the first time. Bill Weld the second time by historically big margins, like I say, in an overwhelming Democrat state, by being penny pinchers and socially liberal. What does that speak to? Doesn't that speak to potentially broad appeal?
Calls lined up for you. The first one is Michael. Identifies himself as a libertarian from Los Angeles. And Michael, go ahead.
Hi, Governor Johnson. Congratulations on winning the nomination.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I would just want to ask a question regarding tax policy. I have seen multiple times, including on the Joe Rogan Experience, you discussing the fair tax, how that might be a better system than income tax, which I would tend to agree with. I just wanted to ask, have you ever looked at a system of like land value taxation as opposed to a consumption tax? Economists like Milton Friedman and across the spectrum over to Mason Gaffney and even Joseph Stiglitz have found that might be actually even more efficient than consumption taxation and fairer to the general public.
Well, first of all, if I'm elected president, just count on me to sign off on anything that would make things better. So, yeah, I'm aware of how that would be a real positive to what we're currently doing. I do advocate eliminating income tax, corporate tax. I think it is the basis for crony capitalism today. Eliminating the IRS. I think that pink slips would go out to 80% of Washington lobbyists if there was no corporate tax. Congress, I think it's possible that they could do that, but if they did that, they would replace it with something. I think that a consumption tax is a lot more fair. On how to accomplish a consumption tax, I've always pointed at the fair tax as a way to dot the I's and cross the T's regarding how to accomplish one federal consumption tax. Take away the IRS. Imagine life without the IRS. Imagine zero corporate tax and the tens of millions of jobs that would get created in this country as opposed to anywhere else in the world, because the United States would have zero corporate tax.
As far as monetary policy, Governor Johnson, a viewer off of Twitter asked if you would plan to keep the Federal Reserve.
Well, as President of the United States, I'm getting elected President of the United States, not dictator. So with regard to the Federal Reserve, look, if Congress were to submit legislation to abolish the Federal Reserve, they would replace it with regional banking. I don't think they're going to submit legislation saying abolish the Federal Reserve. If they did, I would sign off on that legislation. But regarding the Federal Reserve, we should audit the Federal Reserve, and we should get rid of the dual mandate that the Federal Reserve now has, which is keeping inflation in check and full employment, which I think are at loggerheads with one another. I think that the mandate should be to reduce inflation.
From Lawrenceville, Georgia, Republican line. Ed, you're next. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, as you know, our military has been shrinking. Now, if you were president, exactly, what I want to know, here's my question. Would you increase the amount of money we're spending right now, or would you lower it? And isn't it true that you'd like to basically get rid of the military?
Well, absolutely not get rid of the military. I mean, look, if we're attacked, we're going to attack back. We should provide ourselves with an impenetrable national defense, but not offense. And we need to involve Congress in a declaration of war or a declaration of how we proceed in the Middle East, something that they've abdicated to the executive, something they've abdicated to the military. We have 69 treaties in the world today where we are obligated to defend 69 countries' their borders. And those treaties have not involved Congress. Congress has given up that responsibility. I would not let Congress off the hook. We need an open debate and discussion over military policy, something that is currently not happening.
Albuquerque, New Mexico, Libertarian. Eric, hello.
Good morning. Governor Johnson, I was at the Libertarian Convention here. You weren't there. To say that I think it's more important that we grow the Libertarian Party than that you become president by nominating yourself and Governor Weld. And neither one of you are original libertarians. He made a statement at the convention that he was the original libertarian. I don't think if anyone was running for Republican and become a libertarian can say that.
Governor Johnson?
Gosh, I hope I caught all that. Sorry, a little bit of static in the ear. But by Bill Weld being the original libertarian, look, he was talking about things in the early 90s that nobody else was talking about. Gay rights, women's right to choose, medical marijuana. I'll remind everybody that's watching right now that Bill Weld was denied the ambassadorship to Mexico, blocked by Jesse Helms because he was pro-choice, pro-gay rights, and pro-medical marijuana. Has anyone out there, many of you, of course, weren't even born at that time, but looking back to the 90s, has any of you done things in the 90s that perhaps you have different thoughts about today? Bottom line, though, I always wore libertarian myself as a badge of honor. I remember a couple of months after taking office, a headline in the Albuquerque Journal that said, Gary Johnson's not a Republican, he's a libertarian. Like I say, something I just took as a badge of honor, which broadly speaking, hey, I'm fiscally conservative and I socially care about people making their own choices in their own lives.
New Jersey up next, Independent Line. Maria, go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I have 2 points to make and one question. I believe that if people would go to immigrationcounters.com, they have all the current statistics of the cost of illegal immigration, and the real number is 26 million illegals, of which 97% are from Mexico. Also, with regard to a tariff which Mr. Trump advocates, that was the way, the import tariffs was the way that we supported our country prior to 1916, and it would eliminate the IRS. We would not need that. Now, my question is this. If he is president and takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws, how can he pretend that it's all right for people to stream over the border? And what is his definition of a country? Shouldn't it be border, culture, and language? Thank you very much.
Well, I think you threw out a lot there, but I think a big misunderstanding is the whole notion of illegal immigration. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was people here that were undocumented, but hardworking people, cream of the crop when it comes to workers. I think it would be an economic catastrophe to send people back over the border. An untold story right now is President Obama has broken up 3 million families because of the deportation of parents that have now been separated from their families that are living in the United States. This is something that I don't want to engage in. I think that we should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. I think a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that applicable taxes get paid. You talked about, you talked about tariffs providing most of the income in this country. Well, let's see, prior to the prohibition of alcohol, the number one revenue source in this country was the taxation on alcohol. Might we look at the taxation on marijuana as an added source of revenue also? And hey, exclude revenue from legalizing marijuana. Just look at the savings in law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons. I think the savings in those three areas dwarf the revenue on the legalization side.
Governor Johnson, talk about your relationship to the company Cannabis Sativa. You were a CEO at one time?
Yes, I was and I viewed that as making the world a better place. Marijuana products directly compete with legal prescription painkillers, antidepressants that statistically kill 100,000 people a year. Marijuana products arguably just as effective, not one documented death due to the use of marijuana products. On the recreational side, I have always viewed legalizing marijuana as leading to less overall substance abuse, because people are going to find it as such a safer alternative than everything else that's out there, starting with alcohol. The campaign to legalize marijuana in Colorado was a campaign based on marijuana is safer than alcohol. And all of the statistics that were supposed to go south in Colorado have actually gotten better. And I do mean driving incidents, crime, you name it. Colorado is a vibrant place. Does it have to do with marijuana? I think it has something to do with it. The fact that Colorado really is when it comes to personal liberties and freedoms, they're right at the top of the list.
Governor Gary Johnson, nominee for the Libertarian Party, joining us to take your questions. Las Vegas, Nevada, Independent Line. Jacob, hello.
Hello, Governor Johnson.
Hey.
You're really selling me on the Libertarian Party, but I do have one question. How will smaller government help those under the poverty line pay high medical bills?
Well, you hit on a couple of things. High medical bills. I think medical bills are driven by the government. If we had a free market approach to healthcare, and by the way, healthcare right now is about as far removed from free market as it could be, but if we had a free market approach to healthcare, we would not have insurance to cover ourselves for ongoing medical need. We would have insurance to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and we would pay as you go in a system that would probably cost about 1/5 of what it currently costs right now. We would have gallbladders are us. We would have stitches are us. We would have x-rays are us. We would have advertised pricing for everything that exists in the medical arena, and we would also have outcomes tied to the costs. In other words, look, come get your x-ray for $40 and 100% of our x-rays are readable and without mistake. I use that as an example. Right now, you walk into a hospital, you walk into a doctor's office, you have no idea what it's going to cost because you're not paying for it. Your insurance is, and you know that the costs that actually are billed never really get paid. I think Chief Justice Roberts was right that the Affordable Health Care Act really is a tax. My insurance premiums have quadrupled. I haven't been to see a doctor in 3 years. It's a tax for me.
So would a Johnson administration, would you advocate the dismantling of the law as it currently stands?
Yes, I would. But at the end of the day, I would be President of the United States, and the reforms that are needed when it comes to health care is to genuinely make it more affordable. To genuinely make it more affordable, you've got to allow for competition. Government could also get engaged. Government itself could actually involve itself in blowing the lid on the supply of doctors available, expanding medical schools, something very real. There are only a limited number of doctors. There could be a lot more doctors. Government could play a role in accommodating that.
Here is Mike from Tampa, Florida. Go ahead. You're on our Democrats line.
Yeah, good morning. Given that we have a $19 trillion debt that was incurred by the federal government, how would the Libertarians propose reducing that debt or even paying it off, given the fact that we have necessary government obligations such as the Defense Department? Thank you.
Well, first, hey, let's forget about paying it back because all we do is add to it, and currently 20% of everything that we're spending is really printed money, if you will. It's new debt. So just the ability to put a lid on spending or to reduce spending even a little bit, coupled with economic growth, has a profound impact. So yes, I'd like to turn it on its ear, meaning I think that 20% of government is actually government that doesn't need to exist. Now, I'd be president of the United States. I'm not dictator. I can't wave a magic wand, but myself and Bill Weld, we would be suggesting right out of the blocks a way to reduce government spending by 20%, providing for a balanced budget. I don't see Congress getting on board with that, but maybe they do. But at a minimum, you put a lid on spending. At a minimum, I think that you can reduce spending, like I say, over a short period of time. That in and of itself has a profound impact on a healthier economy.
Do you advocate the dismissal of government workers in order to achieve those goals? And if so, how many?
Well, you can wave a magic wand in many cases, because so much of what has been implemented is executive order. Take the NSA, for example, and the fact that they're spying on you and I as U.S. citizens. I mean, the satellites are all pointed on us right now, being monitored in everything that we do. That is an executive order, 12333 from Truman. In a very short amount of time, as President of the United States, I could make sure that those satellites get turned away from U.S. citizens, something that I do advocate. Come on, those are supposed to be pointed at the enemy. Is NSA arguing that you and I, as citizens of this country, are the enemy? I hope not.
From Laguna Woods, California, a libertarian, Mike is next.
Good morning, Governor. And congratulations. I think the LP really chose well with you and Governor Weld. Recently, Donald Trump has seemingly endorsed Vladimir Putin's policy of assassinating critical reporters. He said on recently, quote, "Putin's running his country, and at least he's a leader, unlike what we have in this country," close quote. However, President Trump would not need to resort to such obvious criminal methods to eliminate critics. By signing the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, President Obama provided the tools for President Trump to, quote, disappear opponents quietly. Mr. Obama inserted a provision in that bill that authorizes the president with indefinite military detention of civilians, including U.S. citizens, without habeas corpus, without due process. One of the problems that you'll have, I'm sure you know this, that the national press really doesn't allow issues that are not issues between the two major parties. How would you get through that, sir?
Well, first of all, you just you laid the table perfectly. Your question in a form of a statement is a profound statement that Donald Trump embraces, or I don't want to say embrace, but points at Vladimir Putin, who in fact does deal with dissidents in a way that we're not supposed to be able to, and yet Donald Trump is advocating First Amendment assault on the press, making it easier to sue the press for statements. Look, this country is about our Constitution. First, second, last. It's all about Constitution. It's all about the Bill of Rights. And I think Donald Trump assaults the Constitution, starting with the First Amendment. So thank you for your statement. And really not so much of a question, but really an accurate statement. Thank you.
Governor Johnson, you mentioned the media. What's your plan on getting involved in the debate process?
Well, right now, the only chance that a third party has of getting elected is to be in the presidential debates. I think that my name should be included in the polls that determines who gets in the debates. The Presidential Debate Commission, made up of Republicans and Democrats, which have no intention whatsoever of seeing another person at the table. There's a real justification that my name should appear in all these polls, because I'm going to be the only third-party candidate on the ballot in all 50 states. All of this talk right now in the media about a third party, if you had all the money in the world, you could not get on the ballot in all 50 states starting tomorrow. If you had all the money in the world starting tomorrow, it would be almost impossible, if not impossible, to get on the ballot in enough states to mathematically be elected President of the United States. And by that I mean being able to garner 270 electoral votes. So for everybody watching, just a demand from the polling organizations that my name be included. I've been included in 3 national polls, 10%, 10%, and 11%. But my name appears in those 3 polls. There are another 40 polls that come out, national polls, that only show Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And when 50% of Americans now registering to vote declare themselves as independent, well, where is that representation? I happen to think that most people in this world are libertarian. It's just that they don't know it.
Fairfield, California. Bill is up next on our Republican line.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to find out the libertarians stand on the assault weapon bans and gun control in general, Second Amendment issues.
Well, just that, in my opinion, libertarians' position, look, if you outlaw guns, criminals are going to have guns. If you outlaw the number of bullets in the magazine, only the criminals are going to have more bullets in the magazine. If you regulate the caliber of bullet, only the criminals are going to have the higher caliber bullet. So gun control sounds terrific, but at the end of the day, I think it makes this country less safe rather than more safe. And let's not forget, this is the Second Amendment. The Constitution guarantees all of us the right to bear arms.
Anthony lives in Patillas, Puerto Rico. Independent line.
Yes, how you doing? How you doing, Mr. Johnson?
Good, thank you.
Listen, I got a question. Now, a big concern in this country right now is our national security. And what I would like to know, how could you expect us as American citizens to take you seriously as a candidate when you are for open borders? When our national security is on the line here. Okay, a lot of people don't talk about this. Our national security, our security for our children, our families are on the line. So how could you expect us to take you seriously as a candidate when you are for open borders? Thank you.
Well, first of all, it's just greatly misunderstood. What I'm for is an easy way to obtain a work visa. Make the line moving to be able to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card. Look, right now, Border Patrol has to deal with illegal immigrants that arguably contain some criminals, but the majority of those illegal immigrants are just hardworking people that want to get over into this country and work. It's women with kids and they're wading the Rio Grande, and the Border Patrol has to deal with those women and children right along with arguably some bad components. Well, what if you made it easy for the mother and her children to come over here and work? So that the illegal crossings, so that Border Patrol could identify basically the fact that anybody that's coming across the border illegally is somebody to be reckoned with. I don't know if I would call that open borders. I would just think that would be prudent management over something that can be done much more effectively. And like I say, dot the I's and cross the T's about everything it is that we care about. Look, we don't want criminals working in this country. We want immigrants to pay their fair share when it comes to taxes, recognizing that we are a country of immigrants and that immigration is really a good thing.
And so, Governor Johnson, on that front, the front page of the New York Times takes a look at the Obama administration's efforts to settle Syrian refugees, hopefully 10,000 of them. Is that something you would endorse and continue in your administration?
Yes, I think that we bear responsibility for the refugee crisis and that we should be taking on our fair share. Now, when I say fair share, what is the mathematics of having disrupted 11 million Syrians out of half the population? Well, when it comes to the United States, I think that we can deal with this effectively. Should it be carte blanche? Well, perhaps not carte blanche, but it seems to me that we can have a system in place to accept refugees right off the bat. Other refugees may be questionable, backgrounds, whatever, but hey, we're smart enough and we've directed enough of our resource on the military side, I think, to deal with the refugee side of this humanely and in a way that reflects what America is all about. Opportunity, freedom, liberty. You want to come to the United States, work hard, be honest, you're going to get ahead.
The Libertarian presidential nominee, Gary Johnson, with us, the former governor of New Mexico. Harold, Westwood, New Jersey, Republican line, you're on next with him. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Gary, you make a lot of sense. You really do. And you make a lot of sense on one issue. You make a lot of sense on a lot of issues. But there's really one thing. You apparently ignore a part of the Constitution in regard to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Would you give money to Planned Parenthood? And additionally, do you believe that our country was founded on the value that God is Father of all? God loves all. God said the golden commandment, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Gary, I would vote for you. I normally vote for the Constitution Party because I believe in the Constitution. But if you would stand for what our founding fathers worked so hard to, and cleverly, month after month, I think you're as smart as them, and I think if you were there when our Constitution was started, would you then believe in life? God loves us all. God, now, the one other thing that the reality, Gary, the reality is we are by nature fallen people. The devil is also active trying to stop you or anybody else that wants to do really, really good things. So I will pray for you that all the libertarians would love life, because life is so precious.
Harold, we'll let him answer the question. Governor Johnson, go ahead.
Well, Harold, you touch on a number of things there. First and foremost, abortion. How can there be a more difficult decision in anyone's life? But me, look, it's the woman involved that needs to make those choices. And I fervently believe that. When it comes to Planned Parenthood, look, I'm looking to reduce the size of government. I don't want to target Planned Parenthood as something that I would not fund. Would I propose a reduced expenditure to Planned Parenthood? Yes, just like I would propose a reduced expenditure to everything. But I think Republicans, at the end of the day, they end up really taking it on the chin when it comes to targeting Planned Parenthood. Look, target lower spending, and in that context, Planned Parenthood is a part of the whole. And then regarding the separation of church and state, I fervently believe that there should be a separation of church and state. I grew up as a Christian, but should God play a role in government? No, I think that is firmly established in the Constitution.
Dave, this is Claudia, Prescott, Arizona, Democrats line.
Hi there, Mr. Johnson. I know you're a Republican in your past.
Or libertarian. Libertarian.
Well, he was a Republican, wasn't he, as a governor?
Yes, but a libertarian Republican governor, today libertarian presidential candidate. So I really want to draw a line of distinction.
Okay,
I'm a libertarian.
All right.
I'm trying.
Well,
okay, thank you.
You can't really bury your past, but
no, you
really
can't.
like
None of us
see
can.
Him and William Weld stand behind Bernie Sanders. Maybe sit down and talk to him and group together, because there's a whole lot of people out here that want Bernie Sanders to win the nomination, and if he's not in the nomination, I'm sure you'd take home the prize if you had all the ideas Bernie Sanders has and 3/4 of America have.
Thanks, Claudia.
Well, Claudia, and here's a pitch to make to everybody out there, which is the website isidewith.com. isidewith.com. Get online, take that political quiz, I Side With, really simple, 60 questions. You don't have to register, but at the end of that quiz, you get paired up with the presidential candidate most in line with your views. Don't we all owe it to ourselves to find out who we align with, who we side with? Well, in that context, of course, I side with myself 100% of the time. But interestingly, of all the presidential candidates, I next side with Bernie Sanders at 73%. Now, that's the side of Bernie that has to do with pro-choice, pro-marriage equality. Let's stop with the military interventions, that there is crony capitalism, that government really isn't fair when it comes to this level playing field. Legalize marijuana. Look, 73% of what Bernie says, I agree with. We come to a T in the road when it comes to economics. I would really argue that if we absolutely had a fair system of economics, free markets, that we would do a lot better than going down the path of socialism. And look, libertarians agree with socialism as long as it's voluntary. But when it's forced, that's tyranny. So that's the libertarian perspective. But I think there's so much in common that just factually speaking, take a look. Take a look, Bernie Sanders supporters. Take a look at who you next side with.
David, Willow Spring, North Carolina, Independent Line.
Good morning. Governor Johnson, a few callers back, you were talking about the Affordable Care Act, and there are some polls in the country that showed that between 60 and 65% of the population, while not happy with the Affordable Care Act in its current state, would like to see it repaired and improved upon. I wanted to know if you would be open to something like that for the pre-existing conditions, children being able to stay on their parents' plan till 26, some of those type things. And I do want to let you know, though, that after watching the interview this morning as an independent, was leaning Bernie Sanders, but your stances on issues, individual rights, staying out of nation building, you're convincing one voter that it would be an outrage if you're not allowed to compete in the debates. Thank you.
Well, to your point, would you sign on? I mean, here's bottom line. What I'm hearing you say is, would you sign on to things that make things better? Yes, count on me to sign on to anything that makes things better. But also count on me to actually veto legislation that, although it sounds terrific, at the end of the day, if it just adds time and money to our lives and really doesn't add anything to government other than adding time and money to our lives, let's get rid of it. As President of the United States, look, I'll tell you what I advocate, but hey, count on me to sign on or support anything that comes out of Congress that makes our lives better.
We have a little short on time, so Karen from Lakeview, Oregon, on our Republican line, jump right in.
Okay. I hear you saying that we've always been a nation of immigrants, and Republicans, Democrats, and the Libertarians are pretty much on board with that. I would like to say that any good rancher knows that if you can't put more than so many cows on a piece of land, or the land will be adversely affected. So what my comment is at some point we need to decide, okay, how many people can we have in America and still sustain our population with ranch land, land to grow our crops. And also, I'm concerned about Christians. Christians have been under attack by the LGBT, or whatever you call them, the lesbian, gay population. What are you going to do to protect the cake maker who is being forced to sell to the LGBT? The government's gotten so involved in this, and they will threaten you with removing their federal tax dollars if you don't go along with it. I am very concerned about Christians. And then the last thing is legalization of pot. It's a gateway drug to harder drugs. And so what are you going to do to make sure that people who are smoking pot, especially children, are able to learn in school and don't go on to bigger and better drugs?
Karen, thank you. Governor Johnson, you can answer one of those, whatever you like.
Boy, there was a lot on the plate. I think I probably addressed every one of those questions. Look, I support gay rights. Just count on me. We should not have any part of discrimination whatsoever. And then with regard to immigrants, look, an untold truth, we need a whole lot of immigrants to be working and paying into a social security system that in the future looks bankrupt. And isn't this country a country of immigrants? Don't we want people to pursue the American dream? And the American dream, isn't that rooted in working hard, being honest, and rewarded for the fruits of your efforts?
Governor Gary Johnson is the Libertarian presidential nominee. Governor Johnson, thank you for being on C-SPAN.
Hey, pleasure. A wonderful format. I hope you'll invite me back. Thank you.
We take you now